Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Everything EV, the podcast that is focused on everything electric. Here we'll be discussing everything to do with electric travel, ranging from cars, bikes, scooters, boats and even planes. And for this episode it is planes which we'll be focusing on, as I'll be joined by Jeff Zaltman, the CEO of AirRace, the world's first and only all-electric airplane racing championship. He's widely recognised as a world-leading promoter in the development of air races, having established the international Formula 1 air racing series Air Race 1, as well as several other series. By the sounds of things, he's a very busy man, and so we're very grateful for the fact that he's found time to join us today. Jeff, welcome to the podcast. First things first, Air Race. It sounds amazing, and as the person responsible for bringing this to life, you must be really excited.
Yeah, no, this is a fantastic time. Actually, every day is an exciting day for us, and it just gets more and more exciting as we progress with the series. Yeah, it feels like we're really on the verge of history. So it's very exciting. So I started the project a few years ago. Well, depends on how we define the project. I've been working in air racing for many years, but electric air racing as of the past few years. And it's just really shooting up in terms of excitement level and maturity and everything else and momentum.
We'll come back to the series in just a second, but I just wanted to follow up on your background. Obviously, you've been involved in air racing for a number of years now. Can you just give us an overview of your career so far and how it's led you to this point?
Yeah, so I've been involved with air racing for 17 or 18 years, maybe even more. I've been a pilot for longer, and that's really the answer to the question. I think is, when I became a pilot, I actually, to be honest, had never heard of air racing before I became a pilot, and then having just sort of being around the pilots and the community and realizing that there's this amazing motorsport out there that we called air racing, and people do this really exciting kind of crazy activity. I was like, why don't people know about this? Why is this so unknown? It's such an exciting sport. So I set out to try to find a sort of a way to bring it out to the mainstream, sort of a platform to showcase air racing to the world, because air racing has over 100 years of history, a lot of history behind it. It used to be one of the most popular sports on the planet, many decades ago. So I thought, how do we bring that back, and how do we develop that? So I've been doing air racing events around the world, at least 10 countries, 4 continents, all around, of different formats, different types of races, and really leading that, on a global basis. And now we're at a new heyday, sort of a new crossroads, a new milestone to take air racing into the future by going electric. So that's really exciting opportunity for us to capitalize on that legacy of 100 plus years and take it into the next 100 plus years.
Yeah, amazing. And now in that 100 or so year history, we're at this point now where, like you said, it is going electric. Can you just talk about AirAC, the project itself, from when it started to where we are now with the series?
Yeah, so AirAC started, as we've kind of indicated, it came along from Air Race 1, which is based on a sport called Formula 1 air racing. So it's an existing format of racing that's been around for 75 years, and we've been running those events around the world as Air Race 1. Air Race E came about 3 years ago, when we took the same format. Basically, it's the exact same format of Formula 1 racing, and converted it to electric. And I mentioned the format. I should probably stop and explain it. This is 8 airplanes lining up on the runway, all together for a race start, standing start race start. They drop the green flag and they take off all together, all 8 planes. They climb to about 10 meters above the ground, racing in an oval circuit, multiple laps, and first one across the finish line wins. So they're passing and trying to get around each other. I mean, it's pure motorsport, fastest motorsport in the world, and it is just really exciting. So this format has, it's just an amazing format. So we took that, and not only is it exciting, but it also has a long history of, really let's call it rules. So there's safety rules, there's procedures, there's expertise, and there's a community around it that makes it as safe as possible, and also as exciting as possible. So we work with that and decided, let's use what already works. Let's use this format of air racing, which is super exciting, and but let's take it forward into the future, where in the direction that aviation is heading, and let's work on the electrification of aerospace by using this racing format as a platform for development. So about 3 years ago, I took the plunge and I said, it just kind of hit me. It was kind of strange. I mean, how did it come about? I guess it was a bit of a soft approach for perhaps even a few years when I had been approached by different electric airplane manufacturers and people in the space, and where they were just postulating, "Hey, Jeff, you're the racing guy. You're the global racing guy. Can you do a race with our electric race planes?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, I suppose. We can organize something. We can figure out something." But either the planes weren't ready yet, they weren't quite developed, or required us to sort of purchase 8 airplanes or something, and there were sort of barriers to entry for those types of business model. And so it just kind of sat there, and people would approach me about it, electric racing, and I always kind of thought, just like most other people did, that it was kind of off in the future, right? Something, it'll come around someday. And then I just realized, you know what, we actually have the technology and the ability and the capability, and more importantly, the demand and the need to do this right now. So why not just do it? And that kind of all came together. And then I thought, but instead of having sort of picking a manufacturer and racing 8 of their planes against each other, we really want it to be a technological competition as well. So what I did was I said, well, why don't we take sort of one of each of those manufacturers, or just multiple manufacturers, and pit the technology against each other on the race course. So it's a test of technology, not just, a race circuit. So that all kind of came together, and it really kind of hit me. Let's say it took me a few years to kind of dawn on me, but when it did, it hit me as almost an epiphany. And I just said, I'm doing this. And we announced it, and we just went full speed ahead, and launched into it. So, so we're really sitting on a good foundation, but also have a really, really exciting path that we're blazing forward, and we're leading the way. We're the first, to be doing this.
I mean, it just sounds absolutely amazing and really exciting. One thing I wanted to touch on is that electric motorsport is growing in general. Obviously, you've got the emergence of Formula E and Extreme E racing series as well. I just wanted to get your opinion on why electric motorsport in general is getting so much attention at the minute, and why now is the perfect time to launch Air Race E.
Yeah, I mean, it really is a fascinating question, because I mean, the whole segment of electric motorsport is absolutely burgeoning. It's expanding. It's growing really rapidly. I mean, even just a few years ago, I think it was met with a lot of skepticism and doubt, and people were critical, and some people were optimistic, as they should have been. But there was a lot of, I wouldn't say criticism, but skepticism. And they just blew that all away. I mean, really, all of the series out there that have been pioneering in electrification are all doing a really good job of taking the steps forward that they need to do. It was really, I guess, at least in my perspective, kind of pioneered by Formula E, the electric car race series, and they've just done a great job, and they've really proved the case. They've really proved the concept, and that the audiences, in addition to just the world at large, want this. They really appreciate it, and the racing can be and is just as exciting. So it's really exciting racing. We don't lose anything by that, but we're also adopting new technology. So there's many more elements and dimensions to the sport. So for air racing, going electric, I guess that was the big paradigm shift, the big leap. We're all accustomed to cars, being electric. I mean, we haven't all adopted an electric car, the use of an electric car, but we accept it. We know they're there. It's quite comfortable. We know, it's still novel, but it's pretty routine. But it's taken, of course, decades for automotive to reach that point. And now it has. And I think for automotive in particular, it's at a really, really, crystallizing moment where it's just going to become ubiquitous in an exponential rate. And so I think aviation, I mean, this is where we can shift our sights to aviation, and that's the next frontier. That is the next place to go electric. Now, aviation has different challenges that automotive doesn't have, just in terms of literally the physics of flight. You just cannot fly an airplane with as much battery as you need to take it a meaningful distance with a number of passengers that make it worthwhile. So aviation is behind automotive, but really It's largely because it's kind of had one hand tied behind its back because the laws of physics prevent it from being productive. The cool thing about air racing is that we don't have that issue of endurance. We don't have that issue of distance or carrying passengers. We can take the technology that exists now and run it through its paces and really, grab it and push it to its extreme limits to test it and perfect it on a race circuit, which is a controlled environment, but it's a real world mission. It's a race. You win or you lose. You can measure success. So you can do all these things now, currently, and that will lead to the development of all those technologies in the future. So now is the right moment. Coming back to your point, it's a perfect moment for us to develop this in aviation, and we have the benefit of sort of being able to see how it's evolving in other electric motorsports. So we can kind of really take a nice holistic and collaborative approach. We think there's plenty of opportunity also for lots of collaborations with these other sports.
Yeah, just going back to when you said that the aviation industry, the electric aviation industry, doesn't have the endurance. So for now, you're focusing on the speed side of things. You said the planes are going to be able to reach speeds of up to 280 miles per hour and it's going to be the world's fastest motorsport. I just wanted to touch on the pilots for this series. I mean, they're going to have to be some of the bravest people on the planet, surely, to be taking part in this. Who have you got on board at the moment? What's the sort of the caliber of the pilot needed to compete in a series such as this?
Yeah, well, that's a fair and I'd say accurate observation. Yeah, these planes go fast. We're racing at 10 meters above the ground, 20 meters above the ground, with 7 other airplanes trying to pass you at the same time. So it's not even just the speed; it's the whole environment that you're dealing with in 3 dimensions. So the pilots that are able to compete, even just exist and fly in that environment, let alone be competitive and safe, really are a different caliber. They're different species of pilot almost. It's really interesting. They have to have quite a varied background as well. So it's not just like, are you a pilot and are you fast? You've got to have formation experience, which is flying alongside other people in close proximity. Aerobatic experience. Can you correct for yourself from an inverted position, and how do you control the airplane? And a number of other things. We call it tailwheel experience, which is a unique type of aerobatic plane, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's a number of qualifications they have to go through, and to get race certified, to get their race license, there's courses and a whole host of different hurdles, and of course there's just you have to have the right character. So it's a really important process to vet the pilots and to train them and make them safe and teach them the rules. Of course, we have a large tome of rules they have to understand and be able to work with. So all that aside, in a nutshell, these guys are the top pilots in the world. I mean, they are, and they come from all different walks and backgrounds. Some are fighter pilots, some are just everyday, I guess say every day, but airline pilots every day, because that's where most of us have familiarity with pilots, in a 777 or something like that, or an Airbus 320. And this guy gets out into a race plane on the weekends. And others are doctors and lawyers and mechanics and everything else. And then they focus this as their passion. So they come from all backgrounds. They all have to be absolutely elite, along with the technology and the airplanes themselves, to be able to sort of handle the rigors of flight and also pulling so many G's around a racing circuit.
Now, where are we with the series at the moment, and what's the current situation? I believe it's quite a delicate state for the series at the moment, with the very first flight of an all-electric racing plane taking place next year. What are the next steps for the series as we edge closer to that very first green flag with all of the planes lined up on the starting line?
Yeah, I like that, the first green flag. So we are looking, we're going to be doing the first race next year. We have, and I should mention that eventually we're going to be growing, probably by 2025, to a steady state of 8 races. That's where we see the kind of optimum number of races per year. They'll be all over the world, to a series of 8 races. But next year we're going to be launching our first race, and possibly more. Actually, we have enough interest. We've been talking with 100 something cities, probably 200 cities around the world that are really interested in hosting this event. So we're sorting that out. We're going through a bidding process right now, where we're vetting the different venues, and we have a short list actually now, and we'll be announcing that in the coming few months. But next year, we'll have the host cities lined up for the races, That's almost the easy part. The hard part, of course, is getting the planes there. So you have to have planes to race, and these planes don't exist. So we're building them, we're making them. I say we, I mean, together with the teams. These teams are groups of engineers all around the world. Some of them aircraft manufacturers, some of them mechanics or shops, or even university student teams. And they're all building a dedicated race plane. That's its mission. They're building a plane for this race. So that's very exciting, and that's all happening now. And we're really pleased to say that in July, we just announced a week or so ago that in July we're going to be holding or showcasing our first test flight of an actual electric race plane. First test flight, not just for us, but for anyone in history. So this will be the first flight of a race plane, electrified, and we'll be doing that in July. We'll be announcing more details as we go. And from that point, all the other teams are going to start test flying, and we're going to see all the pieces fall fall to come together, and everything will fall into place over the next year. We're going to have a busy year.
I mean, it certainly sounds like it's going to be a busy year, that's for sure. One thing I did want to touch on just off the back of what you said there, you said that trying to organise all the different cities and the different venues is almost the easy part. Obviously, over the last year, you've surely been faced with some difficulties considering the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic. What have been some of the biggest challenges for you since you decided to take that plunge and go full steam ahead with the series? What's been the hardest part of getting Air AC organised and getting it to this point?
Yeah, that's true, and you're right. Perhaps I was a little dismissive of the ease of getting cities. That's not the case. Certainly, it catches everyone's attention, and people see the value that we bring, and they understand why this is important, and they want to invite Ares E there to showcase their own sustainability objectives, and shine a spotlight on the needs of the infrastructure at the airports, and attract visitors. But with the pandemic, that was all actually a challenge. I mean, everyone got it. It clicks. Ah, great, we want this. But of course, for the past year and a bit, nobody wanted to talk about events, sport, and aviation is another whammy in there. So that was a challenging time, which probably did us some good in some ways, because we got to hone the product and develop it, and the planes are, of course, they continued to work. They did have a lot of issues with suppliers, batteries, and other manufacturers and units that the teams needed to be supplied to build the aircraft were often delayed and held up because factories were shut and distribution channels were interrupted by COVID. So there have been a lot of hiccups, a lot of challenges. As we know, with many industries around the world. But yeah, events and aviation have been kind of hit the hardest, and that's tourism and cities. So that was a challenge. However, we're back in the saddle. The cities are back. They're contacting us and ready to go, and so we see that pent up demand as it'll make us busier than ever. But we see it as putting us in a good position. And I should add, we're in this for the long haul. This is a 20, 40, 50, 100-year project. So we're not worried about, just next year. That's not where our target is. It's long term. So we're going to do it right. We're going to do it at the pace that's necessary to develop everything, correctly.
Just to touch on that for a moment, you said that this is obviously a long-term project and something that you see going way into the future. I mean, without this sounding like a typical interview question, what are your hopes for the series, and what position do you hope it's going to be in say 2030? I mean, yeah, that's roughly 10 years away. How do you see the series looking at that stage?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we see this really very much as a mainstream sport. So I think probably the easiest reference is, I could say, look at Formula E. 5, 6, 7 years ago when it started, they did a good job, but hard. Still, not many people on the street, let's say, really knew about it. I think now they've really established themselves. They're doing a good job. They're really well known. They're a big powerhouse in the industry now. Perhaps they're not as, let's say, big, if that's a generic word, as say Formula One car racing, but they're on a really, really big and excellent trajectory. So we want to be doing the same. We're kind of looking at them as a model, but we have our sights on Formula One cars, on NASCAR in the U.S. and the mainstream motorsports. We're always going to be positioned as motorsport. We Like I said, we're expecting to reach mainstream audiences. So it's not just about aviation enthusiasts. It's not even just about motorsport enthusiasts. We think we can appeal to a broader audience. So we have a pretty high ambition for our product and our event within 10 years. But it's absolutely going to be a household name by that time, for sure.
Yeah, just on that timeline, obviously you compared Formula One, for example, to Formula E. Do you think there is a period in the not too distant future where electric motorsport is going to be overtaking, if you'll pardon the pun, overtaking just generic motorsport, and where electricity is just the general format for racing and for motorsport?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, even in Formula One car racing, you also have a form of their hybrid, really. I mean, you have a form of electric propulsion in there as well,
Yeah.
Or technology. So, I think it's going to be, insofar as we believe that electrification is the way of the future in transportation, that will have to be mirrored in motorsport, because what motorsport is intended to do, really, or what it's good at, let's say, it's intended to entertain, but what it's good at is being a proving ground for new technologies, which can be later brought to market in consumer products, right? So the idea is you test it in an extreme environment, you fine tune it, and you can sell it, to bring it to market. So if the market eventually is going to want electric powertrains and technologies, then that's what motorsport's going to be doing, delivering that. So absolutely, I see that as the way forward. Is it 2 years or 20 years? There's a lot of ways to look at that. It's hard to know, but that'll be defined by the market, and that's good. That means that the market is creating a demand for what we're doing, and I think we all believe that demand will be there. So we know our motorsport has a healthy future, and and long term, I think it will be kind of the typical standard, common even form of motorsport.
Okay, amazing. Now, you said before you're known as the global air racing guy and one of the best promoters of air racing there is. Just to finish up, can you give us your best description of Air AC and really try and sell it to someone who may not have heard about the series before?
So Air AC is the perfect blend of pure motorsport, real racing, mixed with technology and the future. So it's taking, imagine everything you know about motorsport, but adding a third dimension, raising it above the ground and making it faster, and having a meaningful impact to the world. Air AC has a meaning, has an importance, and it's the most exciting, the fastest motorsport in the world. So I won't have to be explaining this by the time we have another interview, because everyone's going to know this for themselves.
Amazing. Okay, that's perfect. Well, yeah, like I said, thanks for taking the time to appear on the podcast. It's been great to talk to you. So, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, no, great, Charlie. It's a pleasure. Really delight. So thank you.
Okay, so there we have it, our very first guest on the Everything EV podcast, and what a great guest it was. Many thanks once again to Jeff for coming on, and I'm sure there's going to be quite a few eyes on Air AC after this. Thanks also to everyone that's tuned in and listened. We'll have more podcasts coming your way very shortly, but for now, please do give this episode a like and be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast from to make sure you get every single episode as soon as it's released. You can also get daily electric vehicle news and coverage on our website, evpowered.co.uk, so be sure to check that out as well. Thanks once again for listening. I've been your host, Charlie Atkinson, and I'll see you on the very next episode of Everything EV.